Hey everyone, this is John Literal here. This is part 10 of the series that I'm doing on the history of the Illuminati. And this is starting on page 97 of the book called The Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin. And unfortunately, I skipped the section on World War II a couple of videos back. And don't know how I did it, but I did. So I've got to backtrack and pick up that section, which I really kind of hate to do that because I've been reading these sections in chronological order as the events happened, where the Illuminati has impacted the world historically. And so anyway, pick up on the section World War II. And as you can see on the screen, by the way, there's a copy of a document that shows the signature of Adolf Hitler and Max Warburg. And it demonstrates that Hitler was working right along with the Illuminati bankers. And that's an important thing to understand. A lot of these key figures that have impacted the world are and have worked with the Illuminati. Mainstream media doesn't, history's recorded by the winners. And so anything in mainstream history, mainstream anything, is censored and controlled by this Illuminati. And I'm not going to go into all that and all the hows and whys, but I'm sure most of you already know. And world leaders are often Illuminati puppets. And so, Hitler's no exception. So let's go ahead and pick up on page 97. Says, as the result of the insider-engineered Versailles Treaty, which, in the words of Lord Curzon, was, quote, not a treaty, but simply a break in hostilities, war clouds were once again forming over Europe. At the same time as the international bankers were bolstering the sagging communist regime in Russia, they were also underwriting huge loans on both sides of the Atlantic for the new regime of Adolf Hitler. The financial backing for Hitler was handled by the Warburg-controlled Mendelssohn Bank of Amsterdam and later by the J. Henry Schroeder Bank with branches in Frankfurt, London, and New York. It is interesting to note that chief legal counsel to the Schroeder Bank was the firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, whose senior partners included John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles of the CFR. There is considerable evidence available to indicate that Hitler had no intentions of attacking Britain and of engaging in a war with a power he greatly admired. As you see on the screen, that's that copy of that document, and here's the little note that Des put with it. It said, this amazing document, a routine appointment of HHC Schatt as administrator of Nazi Germany's money, was deliberately suppressed by insiders at the time of the Nuremberg trials following World War II. It shows the real force behind Hitler, the international bankers, represented by Max Warburg, the brother of Paul Warburg, chief architect of the Federal Reserve System. So as you can see on the screen there, you got Adolf Hitler's signature and Max Warburg's signature. The Second World War was fought in such a way as to further the aims of the Illuminati and to bring their plans much closer to reality. Following the Hitler-Stalin Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, Germany and Russia invaded Poland and divided the country between them. At that point, Britain and France, at the urging of FDR and the insiders, declared war on Germany but not Russia. During the following 8 months, there was a phony war in which very little action took place. While Chamberlain was prime minister, there was no real shooting war with Germany. The leaders of both the German and the Britain governments were aware of the plans of the international bankers to have another major war, and they were negotiating in an effort to avoid it. Hitler wanted Britain to join him in the all-out attack on the conspirators. The controlled press in Britain launched a bitter campaign against Chamberlain. The powers that be wanted Chamberlain out of the way so that they could get a real war underway. Under the propaganda barrage, Chamberlain was forced to resign. He was placed by Winston Churchill. Immediately afterwards, the shooting war started in earnest with a British air attack on Germany. The following year, the German High Command, unknown to Hitler, sent Rudolf Hess to Britain to contact Lord Hamilton and Churchill and to tell them that if they would sign a peace treaty, the German generals would get rid of Hitler and concentrate their military might on the destruction of communism in Russia and other European countries. Churchill refused to agree to the offer made by Hess. Hess was jailed in Britain for the duration of the war. He is presently in the notorious Spandau prison in Germany. Following their failure, the German generals persuaded Hitler to undertake an all-out attack on the Soviet Russia, pointing out that until Russia was defeated, they wouldn't be safe from a stab in the back by Stalin. Immediately after Germany attacked Russia in June 22, 1941, instead of letting Hitler and Stalin destroy each other, the Roosevelt administration began to pour billions of dollars of Lend-Lease aid into Russia in support of the brutal communist regime. Propaganda portrayed Stalin as our noble ally. Jeez. Meanwhile, on the Pacific, policies put into effect by Roosevelt in 1936 were forcing the Japanese into a position where they would either have to fight or capitulate. They decided to fight. There is another indisputable evidence that top government officials in Washington were fully aware in advance of the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. The truth is that the real powers in Washington wanted the war with Japan and were doing everything in their power to induce the Japanese to launch an attack on the U.S. One of the leading court historians explained Roosevelt's mendacity as follows, quote, Franklin Roosevelt repeatedly deceived the American people during the period before Pearl Harbor. The country was overwhelmingly non-interventionist to the day of Pearl Harbor, and an overt attempt to lead the people into war would have resulted in certain failure and an almost certain ousting of Roosevelt in 1940, with a consequent defeat of his ultimate aims, end of quote. And that's from a book called The Man in the Street by Thomas A. Bailey, written in 1948. The American people had to be made to want war. The planned attack on Pearl Harbor, known to top officials in Washington, but hidden by them from our commanders at Pearl Harbor, served the purpose perfectly. Yes, December 7th, 1941 was a day of infamy. That infamy was centered in Washington. Although the war was ostensibly fought to, quote-unquote, save democracy, the opposite was, in fact, the truth. There is a considerable evidence that indicates that the war, particularly in Europe, could have been won much more quickly had the war been run on conventional lines. Germany could have been attacked through the soft underbelly of Europe after Italy surrendered on September 8, 1943. Instead of going straight to Germany's heart, the Allied High Command, under the direction of General Eisenhower, who was a protege of George C. Marshall, who had been responsible with others for withholding news of the planned Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor from our commanders in Hawaii, withdrew much of the heavy equipment from the war front and began to turn the British Isles into a huge armed fortress. For the next 9 months, the British and American air forces pounded away at the centers of German industry. Many German cities were also reduced to piles of rubble. Very little action took place on the ground, in spite of the fact that many of the Allied commanders urged the political leaders to launch a massive assault on Germany from the south and the west. What was the motivation for the refusal of civilian leaders to reject such a logical plan? The author believes that they clearly understood that such an offensive would have resulted in a clear-cut victory for the American and British armies and the occupation of all Germany and all of Eastern Europe. Such a victory would have defeated the real plans of the insiders. The real powers behind the scenes stalled for time and concentrated on two main goals: the destruction of Germany by bombing and the building up of the communist forces in Russia. Only when the communists, with a colossal infusion of American supplies and war material, began to get the upper hand over the Germans did the Allies stage their Normandy invasion and start their slow and very halting push towards the heart of Germany. History records that General Eisenhower and the supreme commander in Europe and those who were behind him at the Washington scene continually made quote-unquote mistakes and quote-unquote blunders, which invariably helped the Russians. Eisenhower stopped the Allied forces, which had invaded from Italy, from crossing the Po Valley, then opened up another front in France. This move gave Stalin more time in which to work his way west, and also opened up the Balkans for invasion by the Russians when the time came. Shortly after the Allies reached Germany from the west, Eisenhower ordered a halt to the advance. As the Russians advanced from the east to central Germany, Eisenhower refused German attempts to surrender. It took another 3 weeks of brutal fighting for the communist hordes to break through German defenses and reach Berlin. Can there be any doubt that it was all planned that way? Absolutely. And that's the end of the section of World War II by Des Griffin in the book called The Fourth Reich of the Rich. I will leave a link in the description box below of a free PDF of this book, Fourth Reich of the Rich. And by the way, I did notice in the comment section that somebody commented that they would like to have a PDF version that is searchable. And you can actually search and even copy and paste from this book if you want to. All you have to do is just use the text on the original platform of the Fourth Reich of the Rich. You don't have to download. I think if you download the actual PDF from archive.org, it will not allow you to do any searches or copy or paste from the PDF. But if you just use the version that, if you just click onto it, you can actually, if you're on a PC, I don't know if you can do it with a, like with a cell phone. You can't. I don't know if you can copy and paste, by a swipe screen, but you can actually on a computer. I can do it, and you can do searches too, word searches, on it. When you're looking at the PDF, there's a place where it's got like the little magnifying glass. Just click on that, type whatever word you want into it, and it will take you right to, the places where those words are. And that's the main reason that I uploaded it to archive.org. One reason is to make this book available to everybody, and also so that I can, I had greedy reasons as well, and that is because I wanted to be able to do word searches and stuff. It makes it easier for me to find what I want when I can do word searches on a document or a book. And it makes it good for my research. So anyway, I'll also put a link in the description box of my latest book, The Illuminati Playbook, The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion and Bel, Volume 1. And so feel free to use that however you want to use it. And so, folks, take care. Have a good day.